Hello, my name is Josipa, and I'd like to start this episode with a quote from one of the founding fathers of United States, Benjamin Franklin, who famously said,
"In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes."
Even though it is over 200 years old, this quote is still accurate and very relevant today. Just as we know that everyone will die someday, we also know that we can't avoid paying taxes. They are our responsibility, and they are important to pay for public services and supporting our social and government systems. So now the tax season is here, and we can't avoid it. In this episode, we'll practice some essential phrases that will help us talk about tax returns.
What?
You know what I'm talking about, right? Tax returns are the official forms and documents that individuals and businesses send, or we could say submit, to the government to report how much money they have earned over the past year and other financial information. Now, I know some of you are already gathering documents, sorting through receipts, and calculating numbers, but I'm not. When it comes to lodging my tax returns, I don't know where to start. By the way, to lodge your tax returns is to submit or file. That means to send in your completed tax return forms to the Australian Taxation Office, or ATO for short. But just to clarify, filling in means entering data or completing the forms, but filing or submitting or lodging means sending the documents to the ATO. Anyway, whether you are just starting to learn about taxes or need a refresher, this episode will help us with some of the language we need to talk about tax. So sit back and relax, because Alan and Claire are here to help us learn.
Have you done your taxes yet?
No, I'm procrastinating. It's so time-consuming and overwhelming.
Oh, I know. But we can't avoid filing a tax return. Have you considered using a tax agent?
To be honest, I'm worried about the cost.
If you file your tax return with a registered tax agent, you can claim their expense from your total income.
I totally relate to Claire. That is, I understand her. I'm procrastinating about my tax return as well. If you're procrastinating about doing something, it means you're delaying doing it. When you procrastinate, you usually choose to do something else that is more enjoyable or easier to do, rather than working on what you should do. Anyway, Alan said,
Have you done your taxes yet?
this is an informal way of asking someone if they have completed and submitted the necessary paperwork and calculations related to their income and expenses for the year. You could also ask,
Have you filled in your tax returns yet?
or you can use a verb you heard me say before.
Have you lodged your tax return?
When you lodge your tax return or file your tax return, you are telling the government about how much money you earn, any expenses you can deduct, that is, subtract or take away, from the total that you have earned, and any other important financial information. This helps the government figure out how much tax you need to pay. Claire then replied,
No, I'm procrastinating. It's so time-consuming and overwhelming.
we already heard that procrastinating means delaying doing something. But if you are not procrastinating, and if you are acting promptly without delay, you could say,
I'm being proactive. I've already lodged my tax returns.
Claire also said that for her, filing a tax return is...
It's so time-consuming and overwhelming.
For Claire, doing her taxes needs a lot of time and effort. What about you? Do you find lodging a tax return difficult, or are you proactive about it? In the dialogue, we heard that Claire hasn't used a tax agent because she is worried about the cost. To which Alan replied,
If you file your tax return with a registered tax agent, you can claim their expense from your total income.
a tax agent is a qualified professional who can help us prepare and lodge our tax returns. In Australia, they must be registered with the Tax Practitioners Board. Now, I know that tax season can be a bit scary for many of us. Even Albert Einstein said,
The hardest thing in the world to understand is the income tax.
but in Australia, we don't have much choice. We have a responsibility to understand the tax system. The Australian tax year, or we can say financial year, runs from July 1st of one year to June 30th of the following year. The tax return, that is, the forms we have to submit to the tax office for any financial year, is typically due by October 31st of that year. But if you lodge your form through a registered tax agent, you can usually have a later deadline. Now Claire decided to stop procrastinating, so she gathered all her documents and went to see a registered tax agent, who sounds very much like her Alan. How incredible!
Based on the information you provided, it seems you've crossed the tax threshold for this financial year.
Yes, I earned more this year. What does that mean for my taxes?
Crossing the tax threshold means you'll enter a specific tax bracket. In your case, your income places you in the 32.5% tax bracket.
So I'll have to pay 32.5% of my income in taxes?
Not exactly. The way taxes work is called progressive taxation. It means that as you earn more money, different parts of your income are taxed at different rates. You don't pay any tax on the first $18,200 that you earned, because that's your tax-free allowance. The next part of your income is taxed at 32.5%, but as you earn more, higher rates apply to the rest of your income.
I see. So what is my tax liability for this financial year?
Let's get straight to work. Alan said,
It seems you've crossed the tax-free threshold for this financial year.
the tax-free threshold is the amount of money you can earn before you must start paying income tax. It's like a minimum income limit. You don't have to pay taxes on the money you earn up to that point. At the time of publishing this episode, in Australia, the tax-free threshold is $18,200. If you earn less than the tax-free threshold, you don't need to pay any taxes. But if you earn more, like Claire, then you are crossing the tax-free threshold and you'll need to start paying taxes. Let's hear how Alan explained it.
Crossing the tax threshold means you'll enter a specific tax bracket. In your case, your income places you in the 32.5% tax bracket.
A tax bracket is a range of income that determines how much tax you must pay. The ATO puts people in different brackets according to how much money they earn. Basically, if you don't earn much money, you will be in a low tax bracket. And if you earn more, you'll be in a higher tax bracket. That's because the Australian tax system uses progressive taxation, which means that the more you earn, the higher the tax rate you'll pay. But if, like me, you're still struggling to make this calculation, then you can ask your tax agent.
What is my tax liability for this financial year?
Liability means a debt or something you owe. So a tax liability means the amount of tax you owe to the government. The opposite of liability is an asset.
There's a tax on hats, a tax on boots, a tax on women's clothes, a tax on all the little things that only a married man knows, a tax on pictures, tax on punters when they back a winner.
What did you think of this song? Did it make you smile? This song, Banish the Budget Blues, was written during a tough economic time in Australia and the world, the Great Depression in the 1930s. It was supposed to make people feel better during a difficult time. But you're absolutely right. Singing won't directly affect how much we pay in taxes. But there is something else that can actually help us reduce our tax bill. It's called a tax deduction. Basically, a tax deduction is an expense that we can subtract from our total income, which means we end up paying taxes on a lower amount. Our guest today is Haig Garabedian, who has years of experience helping individuals navigate the complex world of tax returns. Haig, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me in your program today.
Haig, what are some common types of tax deductions that people can claim?
There are lots of tax deductions or expenses that people can claim. The principle is that it has to be linked to your work. So the most common one is, like, for example, if you travel using your car or public transport from work to visit clients for work purposes. This can be claimed against your income. And if you work from home, you can deduct some of the expenses like electricity and internet bills. Also, expenses for professional development courses and self-education, such as course fees or textbooks that are directly related to your work or career, as well as union fees, may also be eligible for deduction.
Are there any expenses that are not work-related that we can claim?
Yes, if you make donation to registered charities, you can claim those as deductions. Also, the contributions which are personal after you're paying your tax that you make to your superannuation funds, that is your special retirement saving accounts, can be claimed as deductions too.
And anything else we need to keep in mind?
When it comes to deduction, remember that each deduction has its own set of rules. So it's important to have receipts as proof for the expense you're claiming. When we file our taxes, it is crucial to be honest and accurate. We should only claim expenses that we have truly made and that are eligible, that is, are allowed by the rules. If you're not sure about anything, it's always a good idea to check out the guidelines provided by the ATO or have a chat with your tax professional, tax agent.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today.
It's my pleasure, Josipa. And before I go, I'd like to share the importance of us paying taxes, because the government uses this money on welfare, health, defense, education, and all what makes our life what it is now. Just like we pay a price for everything else we buy, we also pay taxes. It is the way we contribute to the well-being of our community and ensure that everyone has access to essential services and a better quality of life.
I completely agree. I like to think of taxes as not just an expense, but rather an investment in general well-being of our society. Now, let's practice phrases we covered in this episode. See if you remember the meaning before hearing the answer. What is the tax-free threshold?
The tax-free threshold is a level set by the government. If you earn more than this level, you need to pay tax.
What is a tax bracket?
A tax bracket is a range of income that determines the percentage of tax you need to pay.
What is tax liability?
The tax liability refers to the amount of tax you owe to the government based on your income and other financial factors.
Now let's practice some useful phrases for discussing taxes by repeating after Alan and Claire.
Have you filled in your tax returns yet?
Have you considered using a tax agent?
I've already lodged my tax returns.
You can claim that expense from your total income.
What is my tax liability for this financial year?
That's all we have for this episode, in which we did not give you any tax or financial advice. For that, you need to see a professional, an accountant, or a tax agent. This episode was about language, but you can still let us know if you have filed your tax return yet. Did you do it yourself? Or, like me, you are considering lodging your taxes with the help of a tax agent. I'm Josipa. Thank you for learning English with me.